My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to 106.7 Wilmington's Big Talker. I'd like to welcome you to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, where each Sunday at 5 p.m., as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. In case you aren't familiar with me, I direct Grassroots North Carolina, or GRNC, since 1994, our state's most effective gun rights organization. As its director, I was involved in drafting and passing our original concealed handgun law. Since then, GRNC has gone on to engineer passage of concealed handgun reciprocity, our purchase permit bypass, Castle Doctrine and Stand Your Ground, the expansion of concealed carry to state and municipal parks, restaurants, public assemblies, educational properties, and much more. Grassroots North Carolina is exactly what the name implies, a grassroots collection of volunteers from all walks of life who share a common concern that our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms are being eroded. Check us out at grnc.org. That's grnc.org. Today, I want to talk about an important event taking place right now, the North Carolina primary elections. Although primary day is March 3rd, early voting is going on right now, and you need to get out and vote. Now, you might be thinking, why bother? There's not a dime's worth of difference between them. Well, that is the type of thinking that helped put Virginia in the predicament they are in right now. Today, we are going to talk about some of the key races across the state and their potential impact on gun rights. Later in the show, we will also discuss the issue with John Richardson, whose award-winning blog is No Lawyers, Only Guns and Money, and can be found at onlygunsandmoney.com. But grab a pen, because we will also give you some resources for voting, including how to get a sample ballot for your location, how you can identify your early voting locations, and perhaps, most importantly, where you can find the candidates most likely to support your right to keep and bear arms. But first, this just in gun rights news. You might not know it, but oligarch and billionaire presidential candidate Michael Bloomberg thinks he owns the ground you walk on, literally. In recent weeks, my organization, Grassroots North Carolina, has twice demonstrated against Bloomberg when he or his minions came to the state in advance of the March 3rd primaries. Particularly amusing was Bloomberg's tour through the state when we demonstrated against him in Greensboro. Would you believe that Bloomberg changed the venue, the location of his event 3 times in order to avoid GRNC's protest? Or how about this one? On GRNC's Facebook page, you can find a lovely picture of one of Bloomberg's staffers trying to block GRNC protesters' access to a public sidewalk in front of the venue by claiming that Bloomberg had, wait for it, purchased the public sidewalk on which GRNC had a permit to protest. Yes, you heard it right. Bloomberg's people claimed to own a public sidewalk. Incidentally, our website features a nice photo of that staffer blocking access to a public sidewalk. On the topic of Michael Bloomberg, I realize there may be some gun owners who are registered as Democrats. We really need to talk about that, by the way. So my recommendation is that if you are registered as a Democrat, in the Democrat primary, vote anybody but Michael Bloomberg. This just in from the People's Republic of Virginia. You've probably heard people celebrating the fact that the so-called assault weapon bill in Virginia got tabled after 4 Democrats from marginal districts refused to play sacrificial lamb. But as I have been telling people, methinks you celebrate too much. In fact, I would suggest that anti-gun Democrats everywhere want you to celebrate, because there are still anti-gun bills quietly moving in Virginia, including SB 71, firearms possession on school property, SB 173, stun weapons, prohibits possession on school property, SB 69, limits on handgun purchases. And by the way, the House Public Safety Committee removed the exemption that would have allowed people with concealed handgun permits to be exempt from the prohibition on purchasing more than one handgun a month. One gun a month. SB 263, concealed handgun permits demonstration of competence. Oh yeah, and NRA instructors would not be allowed to give the instruction under that demonstration of competence. And finally, SB 593, licensed family day homes, storage of firearms. Now, this just in from the ostensible voice of tolerance. You know how the left says we are supposed to be tolerant of people of different ethnicities or backgrounds, but of course that doesn't include people with different opinions than they have, because when it comes to leftist ideology, dissent is not permitted. Rob Morse, writing in AmmoLand.com, just did a synopsis of violence recently perpetrated by leftists against conservatives. Here we go. GOP volunteers were registering voters in Duval County, Florida, when a man drove his van over their tent, their signs, their tables, and their chairs. The driver backed up and took a picture of the debris. Then the driver shouted obscenities, gave the stunned victims the middle finger, and drove away. He's being held in jail on a $500,000 bond. In New Mexico, a former intern of Democrat Governor Grisham spray-painted the state GOP headquarters in Albuquerque. He's been charged with criminal damage to property. A local volunteer from the business community donated security cameras to GOP headquarters in Medford, Oregon. Ooh, Oregon, gone bad. This was after the GOP offices had been vandalized several times, and police said they had no suspects. When the donation became known, the volunteer was threatened. Callers said they would burn down his house. Republican headquarters in Eureka, California, had been vandalized 6 times in the past 2 years. The glass windows and doors were smashed. The interior was defaced with paint. The police called it random violence. Yeah, random. Despite the fact that the Democrat headquarters hadn't been touched. Our perpetrator was back on the street the day after the attack. Oh, those ever-tolerant college campuses. Here we have liberal students at Arizona State University screaming to slit the throats of college Republicans. But that is mild in comparison to the threats received by the Republican candidate for Congress in San Francisco, wow, silly him, who was threatened by an Antifa thug who said that he knew the candidate was racist just by looking at him, said he wanted the candidate dead and wanted to F him up when the cameras weren't around. The attacker was not arrested. And finally, a black man was called a racist and tackled to the ground for wearing a Black Guns Matter t-shirt at a Bernie Sanders rally. The attacker was not charged. Now, I am not a lawyer, but please allow me to note that if you are attacked in such a way, you may use proportionate force in response, up to and including deadly force, if you face a reasonable fear of imminent death or great bodily harm. Please note, too, that under North Carolina's Stand Your Ground law, you are not obligated to retreat from a deadly threat prior to responding to deadly force, provided you are in a place where you may lawfully be. Now, in the next segments, we're going to start talking about the election. We're going to talk about some of the candidates, some of the particularly interesting races. We're going to talk about, we're going to have as our guest, John Richardson of the blog OnlyGunsAndMoney.com. And we are going to give you some information on where you can find voter information, where you can find polling places. The bottom line is that you have a couple of alternatives here. You can either vote or you can help the state become Virginia. Because if the gun vote stays home, if we do not adequately overcome Michael Bloomberg's $60 million that he plans to spend on state-level elections, including in North Carolina, if we do not overcome the fact that Eric Holder and his National Democratic Redistricting Committee have changed our political districts to favor Democrats to a greater extent than previously. If you do not overcome those things, we're going to end up being Virginia. We have an anti-gun governor right now. If he wins re-election and both chambers of the General Assembly go to Democrats, we are seriously screwed. So grab a pen, because the next segments of this show will give you vital information to make sure that doesn't happen. You're listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. After a short break, we will return with John Richardson of No Lawyers, Only Guns and Money, and his take on the ongoing primary elections. You are listening to 106.7, Wilmington's Big Talker, and my name is Paul Vallone. I'd like to welcome you to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, where each Sunday at 5 p.m. as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. Now, today we are going to talk about our elections. And I'm happy to say that we have as our honored guest John Richardson, whose award-winning blog, No Lawyers, Only Guns and Money, can be found at onlygunsandmoney.com. I would also note that John has had the good sense to publish the full list of GRNC's candidate recommendations. Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us today. So, the elections. Tell me something.
Yes.
What do you think about this election versus any other? Is anything different this year?
Tons of money coming in from, we're just inundated with ads on the presidential side from both Mike Bloomberg and Tom Steyer that the mute button on our TV remote is getting one heck of a workout.
Well, that's, of course, because we become a Super Tuesday state now.
Yes. We're not waiting until May anymore.
They decided to be relevant, I guess. But in addition to that, I think you know as well as I that Everytown for Gun Safety, Michael Bloomberg's AstroTurf gun ban organization, has promised to spend $60 million on elections focused in a number of states, including North Carolina. For what purpose do you suppose that might be, John?
As they would call it, gun safety, which is an oxymoron for them. They want more gun control. They want to also take over the North Carolina legislature if they could.
Just like they did Virginia, and with exactly the same agenda as in Virginia. And as a matter of fact, the North Carolina Everytown for Gun Safety folks have actually said that they want to pattern their agenda after Virginia. So we can expect to see that here if the Democrats win the 2020 elections. Would you agree?
I would agree 100%.
So the next question is, what do we got to do about it? Well, obviously, the answer is get out and vote. And also contribute to pro-gun candidates and pro-gun political action committees like GRNCs, for example. Here's a shameless, some shameless self-promotion. GRNC.org, our political action committee, is going to be out there fighting in this election. Now, let's talk about some of the key races. If I said United States Senate Republican primary, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking Tillis is going to win no matter what.
Sad but true. He's not exactly the gun owner's greatest friend, but unfortunately the only primary contender that might have been a reasonable alternative dropped out, and so Tillis is likely to win. That said, however, okay, when it comes to the general, I think he's a pretty clear choice. Would you agree?
I would agree 100%. And unless I'm grossly mistaken, Cal Cunningham will be the Democrat. I see him as kind of a 2020 version of John Edwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Held office for all of 2 years and now an attorney trying to make a name for himself.
He held office for 2 years, and he has done his dead-level best to hide his position on the Second Amendment. He has never filled out a GRNC survey. He's never had a vote. If you go on and look at the other organizations, the Project Vote Smarts and things like that, he has not registered any opinion on that issue there either. So it's not just us.
He's playing, obviously, he's playing up his military service. I went to war in Iraq. You were a JAG lawyer attached to an outfit. I'm sorry. And you have votevets.org that was initially saying, oh, he got the Bronze Star. But they didn't say Bronze Star with V for Valor. But that kind of really irritated me, and I think should irritate any veteran.
I don't know, John. Lawyers get shot at a lot. But anyways, that's a different matter. Governor's race. What you thinking for the governor's race?
We have a clear choice between a pro-gun Republicans and Roy Cooper, who has never really been pro-gun.
Oh, no, he's very anti-gun. I remember Roy quite well when he was the Senate Judiciary Chairman in the late 1990s, and he killed all of our bills by denying them hearings. So Roy is not our buddy. He's come out in favor of a terrorist watch list to ban you from buying guns and a variety of other things. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know that much about Holly. Shows you how much I know her last name.
Holly Grange.
Grange. Pro-gun, yes, but Dan Forest is going to be the candidate.
Yeah, when you look for somebody who's going to lead on the issue, who's really going to stand out, I think Dan Forest is it. And what's more, I think he also runs a very good campaign, and I think he has the best chance of actually beating Roy Cooper. I think the way we put it was in our recommendations, 2 questions stand out in this race. Which candidate is the strongest proponent for the Second Amendment, and which is the most likely to unseat anti-gun incumbent Democrat Governor Roy Cooper? In both cases, the answer is Dan Forest. This guy answered our survey with, I believe, a 96% survey score. He has called every election year to ask for our survey to make sure that he didn't miss it, as opposed to the many candidates who call me up after they get a 0-star evaluation, after they have failed to respond to the survey, and then they go, well, you didn't send me a survey. I said, first off, we did send a survey because we send them to all candidates at their State Board of Elections registered address. And second off, why don't you be more like Dan Forest and call us up and ask for the survey? Don't they teach you in candidate boot camp to go out and reach out to the organizations likely to support you? I mean, it's ridiculous.
I would agree. And one thing I really do kind of like about Dan Forest, he's not a lawyer. He's an architect. It's kind of nice for a change.
Yeah, here. Lieutenant Governor, what you thinking?
Well, there are actually some big names there. Renee Elmers, Mark Johnson, Superintendent of Public Instruction, and, of course, Mark Robinson. Mm-hmm. Now, before I get to Mark Robinson, one thing I would say about Mark Johnson, Superintendent of Public Instruction,
mm-hmm. Yes.
Since 2016, he has been on my radar. Why in the world did Michael Bloomberg give him a $5,000 campaign contribution when he was running for Superintendent of Public Instruction?
Oh, I suppose that's probably so that they could get gun control into the schools, you think?
That or no armed teachers or anything approaching that?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So the lieutenant governor's race, I mean, I guess our standout is Mark Robinson because, I mean, Mark is the guy who went, I guess, viral back last year when he addressed the Greensboro, I believe it was the city council,
yep.
About their proposed ban on gun shows at the Coliseum, which they couldn't do, but that was a different matter. But his impassioned plea not to restrict his Second Amendment freedoms, particularly coming from a minority, was just absolutely compelling. Would you not agree?
I would agree 100%. And I mean, I'm not sure if he's making it public knowledge, but he is a member of the board of directors for the NRA as well.
Did he
not
win
always
that?
our.
Did he win that race? I can't remember if he won it or not. I know he ran.
He did not win the race, but since there were so many resignations, they filled from the people who were on the ballot.
All right, fine. But I won't hold it against him if he's on the NRA board of directors.
Exactly.
He did it for the best of reasons anyways. Okay, congressional races. Anyone stand out in your mind?
Well, being that I'm now being transferred from the 10th, I started in the 11th, went to the 10th. I will be back in the 11th, even though I have not moved.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. Unfortunately, I'm not going to have Mark Meadows as my future congressman, but yeah, there's a number of good candidates. Linda Bennett, who did get the endorsement from Mark Meadows, and that carries a lot of weight, along with Jim Jordan. Jim Davis from out in Macon County.
You promised me you were going to silence that. You know that,
I
right?
turned off my volume. So, but yeah, there's a lot of good candidates. They're all conservative. I'm surprised that there's been a lot of TV ads. The two strongest ones that you would think are the strongest didn't return their ballots.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that in just a minute. I'll tell you what, let's take a break right now, and when we come back, we will resume with the congressional races. Right now, you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker. We're going to take a short break, after which we will return with still more critical information better enabling you to defend your gun rights. My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Today we have as our guest John Richardson, whose award-winning blog, No Lawyers, Only Guns and Money, can be found at onlygunsandmoney.com. John, so let's continue talking about these congressional races. We were talking about the 11th. Now, the 11th is a free-for-all because, unfortunately, Mark Meadows, who has truly been a friend of conservatives and gun owners, elected not to run again, and the free-for-all has now placed, I believe it is 12 Republican candidates. Is that what it was? I think it's 12.
I will defer to you on that. It looks
I think
there's
it's
a pile
12.
of them.
Yeah, 7 answered our survey, and I believe there were 12 all told. And it's actually generating a surprising amount of, as I said, acrimony. What's going on in this race exactly, do you think?
There's a lot of TV ads all of a sudden, or have been, from Chuck Archard, from Dan Driscoll, Jim Davis. I'm not sure if I've seen any. I've seen a couple maybe from Linda Bennett. I've gotten mailings from Madison Cawthorn, from Wayne King, from Joey Osborne.
Oh, I have a stack. I live in this district too, so I have a stack of the political mailings in this district. But yes, go ahead.
There are a lot of good candidates, and the question is, will anybody get to the 30 or 40%
looks like an
mark before you could get
Yep.
to avoid a second runoff, to avoid a runoff?
Yep, get ready for a runoff in this one. And in fairness now, Jim Davis is the incumbent state senator for District 50. He does have a 100% voting record. Okay, I'm not saying he's a bad guy. Now, GRNC Political Victory Fund ended up recommending Linda Bennett, and I've actually taken some heat for this. But Jim, he votes right, but he's never really stuck his neck out for gun owners, never really been a leader on the issue. And when we make candidate recommendations, the GRNC Political Victory Fund looks for leaders. Now, Linda Bennett, she's been endorsed by outgoing Congressman Mark Meadows. She has, as you correctly noted, promised to join the Freedom Caucus, along with Jim Jordan and company. She has got the support of the Asheville Tea Party, which is a very active group of conservatives in the Asheville area, heaven help them, because it is after all Asheville we're talking about. Oh, she scored 100% on our candidate survey.
Exactly.
And I mean, she looks like the best of the lot. I'm kind of disappointed that Madison Cawthorn didn't return our survey, because I certainly like his ads. I would have liked to have seen more about his perspective on issues, but he didn't bother to return the survey. So, and I get this all the time, well, why did you give such and such a 0-star evaluation? I said, well, because he didn't return the survey and he doesn't have a voting record on gun issues. And as I've been saying again and again and again, I can't help a candidate who won't help himself.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think there are some candidates, I mean, a Madison Cawthorn, a Dan Driscoll, who reached a little too high. And they needed, this is their first electoral campaign. Dan Driscoll, he's got a good, I mean, he's a law degree from Yale. He's a lawyer. Combat veteran. Congress might have been a little too, reaching a little too high, maybe a state house or state senate, and then run for Congress.
Yep. So, but at any rate, I'm going to say I'm not saying I wouldn't support a lot of these other candidates in the general election. We have just recommended Linda Bennett because she looks like the most likely to be a Second Amendment leader in Congress if elected. So, take that for what it's worth, but, please don't beat me up over it, because God knows enough people have already been doing that. Now, District 2, okay, this one's a little bit different. We normally don't get involved with the GRNC Political Victory Fund in Democrat primaries because there usually aren't a lot of good candidates. Not lately, anyways. I mean, in years past, I'm not trying to be partisan. In years past, I've had Democrats sponsoring my gun bills in the General Assembly. But that was a different Democrat Party than we have today. So District 2, what do you think about that one? That's the one with Deb.
Well, I think basically George Holding got screwed in redistricting by the courts. Basically, we're losing one, if not two, Republican seats, and so you have very virulently anti-gun Deborah Ross, whose voting record's what, a 21 or 29? 21 voting record.
21, that's correct. 21% pro-gun voting record. She's never met a gun she wouldn't ban.
Exactly. I mean, unfortunately, it's a seat that was made for her, and so you just hope that she can't win.
Unfortunately, it was drawn for the Democrats. It was drawn as the result of Eric Holder's lawsuits for his National Democratic Redistricting Committee, and their Sue Till They're Blue campaign. And so they have turned that from a red to a blue state, almost no matter what. But we are recommending that people vote for Ali O'Neill Nelson, who got a GRNC survey of 55% and 0 stars. Not because he's particularly pro-gun, but because his opponent, Deborah Ross, the likely winner of the district, has a long history of opposing gun rights. So obviously, if you're unaffiliated, you can vote in either primary. You probably want to vote the Republican primary. But if you're a gun rights supporter who is still registered as a Democrat, call me. We'll talk about that. If you're a gun rights supporter who's still registered as a Democrat, I would recommend that you vote against Deborah Ross in this particular race. And by the way, if you're a registered Democrat and you're going to vote a Democrat primary, please vote for anybody but Michael Bloomberg in the presidential race. Please. Anyways, 10th Congressional. Patrick McHenry, he's been there for a long time. He's dropped some votes recently. What are you thinking about him?
He had been the deputy majority whip. Now he gave up that position. Well, he became a minority whip, but
right.
I think he will probably win re-election.
I think he should. I mean, McHenry was the guy who at the very beginning actually helped us clean up our concealed handgun reciprocity bill when he was in the North Carolina House, which, quite frankly, the NRA was doing its dead level best to screw up, but that's a whole other story. So McHenry has been a friend of gun owners for many years. Grassroots North Carolina Political Victory Fund was instrumental in getting him first elected in, I don't know, what was it, 2002, something like that. And, I mean, he won his runoff election by, I believe it was 96 votes. Okay, thanks in large part to us. But he's dropped a couple of votes recently, so I've kind of sent him a message kind of going, hello, don't forget who brung you to the dance. But so far, I still think he's probably the best one in the, in the race. And we're continuing to recommend, Congressman McHenry. Now, General Assembly races. The one I'm sure you've been dealing with is the place you said you plan to retire to. Is that what you?
Well, we're thinking about retiring eventually to Davidson County, just south of Winston-Salem. Mm-hmm. And yes, it looks like Sam Watford is running in eastern part of Davidson County, from I guess the Guilford County line through Thomasville up to Walberg and whatever. But he's not exactly a friend of ours.
You think. This is the guy who, Sam Watford, Republican Sam Watford, is probably the most anti-gun Republican in the North Carolina House, or was in the North Carolina House, and yet continues to deny it. This was the guy who voted against our constitutional carry bill, or actually permitless carry bill, House Bill 746. Now, he maintains that he just voted against it because it had a provision for 18-year-olds carrying concealed, and he didn't want that. Well, the reality is that we had already told him we would lose that if necessary, so he knew that. And what's more, he voted against any number of other provisions in this omnibus bill, including gun safety education for kids in schools, reducing harassment by law enforcement for people carrying concealed, language prohibiting sheriffs from arbitrarily denying permits to like veterans with PTSD and other things that should not be disqualifying. So Sam Watford is not our buddy, and we are recommending that people vote Roger Younts in the North Carolina House District 80 race for Davidson County. Roger Younts, not Sam Watford. You got any other input on old Sam there?
No. Hopefully he goes back to his excavation business.
All right. Well, sir, I think we're running out of time for this segment. Thank you very much for joining us, John. We're going to have you on again sometime real soon.
Thank you very much.
And folks, you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker. We'll take a short break, after which we will return with still more critical information enabling you to better defend your gun rights. My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. Hope you've got that pen handy, folks, because more voter information is coming at you right now, including how to check your voter listing, get a sample ballot, and find out where to vote early. For a summary of all candidate information, please go to grnc.org. That's grnc.org, where you can find links for two things. First, we have candidate evaluations for all of the candidates for state and federal office across North Carolina. I say evaluation because that is exactly what we have done, provided a thorough and objective evaluation of where each candidate stands with respect to Second Amendment issues. To do that, we compile voting records on gun issues stretching back 26 years, plus history of any gun-related bills they might have sponsored, and answers to GRNC's candidate survey, and another measure we call bill support, which measures whether or not leadership gives hearings to pro-gun or anti-gun bills. All of this is entered into a database, which estimates the percentage of time a given candidate can be expected to agree with a control group of conservative gun owners. A candidate who agrees at least 90% of the time earns 4 stars, 80% 3 stars on down the list, and it is important to note that GRNC uses a highly sophisticated candidate survey as opposed to simple statements of support, which is typically used by the NRA and other organizations. In GRNC's survey, by contrast, candidates respond to a 5-point strongly agree to strongly disagree scale, which is then compared to the responses by the control group of conservative gun owners. There is no right or wrong answer. There is only the extent to which a candidate's responses agree or fail to agree with the control group. However, a candidate who fails to answer the survey gets a big fat 0 on the assumption that he or she is hiding their stance on gun issues from voters. The second thing you will find at grnc.org is a link to GRNC Political Victory Fund, or GRNC PVF, candidate recommendations. These recommendations given by our PAC are different from objective candidate evaluations. The recommendations are our assessment of the best Second Amendment supporter in a given race. As such, they are slightly more subjective than GRNC evaluations, but this is important. GRNC candidate recommendations are different than other groups' so-called endorsements because the recommendations are not a blanket endorsement of everything a candidate stands for. We do not endorse the candidate's stance on other issues, for example, abortion or immigration policy, nor do we attest to a candidate's character. I mean, we're evaluating 600, this time we sent out 670 candidate surveys. For those other issues, we recommend that you do some research. For example, a few years ago, we recommended a candidate in a Republican primary who ended up making some offensive comments. The Durham Herald-Sun promptly accused us of endorsing the candidate, but they had to retract the accusation when our candidate recommendation system was shown to them. So again, go to grnc.org and click on GRNC Political Victory Fund Candidate Recommendations, and you can see our assessment of the best Second Amendment candidate in a given race. It is important to note that we do not make recommendations in all races. We don't make PVF recommendations in races that are not relevant to gun rights, like cabinet of state races, or in primary elections. We don't make recommendations if the candidate doesn't have a primary. We don't make recommendations in races for which there are no pro-gun candidates, and we don't make recommendations in races where gun rights stances of the candidates are not significantly different. However, you can always get objective GRNC candidate evaluations for any race in the state, with the exception of judicial races, because frankly there are just too many. But for the candidate evaluations, go to grnc.org, grnc.org. Now here are some of the resources you can check for your voter listing, including your districts, get a sample ballot, and find out where you can vote early. It's important to note that even if you are not currently registered to vote where you live, you can do one-stop voter registration and voting up until February 29th at one-stop voting locations. Again, one-stop early voting ends this Saturday, February 29th. The last day to request absentee ballots by mail for the March 3rd primary is 5 p.m. February 25th. To find early voting locations in your county, go to, you ready? VT, I guess that's like vote, VT.NCSBE, that's North Carolina State Board of Elections, VT.NCSBE.gov/OSSITE. Again, that's VT.NCSBE.gov/OSSITE. To look up your voter registration, go to vt.ncsb.gov/ I guess this is registration lookup, REGLKUP. Again, /REGLKUP. And to find your polling place on Election Day, go to vt.ncsbe.gov/PPLKUP. Not even sure what that stands for. vt.ncsbe.gov/PPLKUP. Primary election day is March 3rd, and you can vote between 6:30 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. Remember, if you are registered as unaffiliated, you may vote in either the Republican or Democrat primary election. Now, in terms of some of the races you should pay attention to, U.S. President. Obviously, realizing that no candidate who reaches the level of president will be perfect, Donald Trump has refused to allow Republicans to consider the two gun control bills passed by the Democrat-controlled U.S. House. Although the BATFE during the Trump administration did enact the so-called bump stock ban, it also reversed the Obama-era directive to report Social Security recipients with designated benefit payees as prohibited persons under the National Instant Check system, as well as remove some of the restrictive interpretations with the BATF on AR pistols and some other things. GRNC PVF recommends incumbent President Donald Trump. U.S. Senate, we've talked about it. It's disappointing. Thom Tillis is probably the only one that can actually win the general election in November. I held my nose and voted for Thom Tillis, I'm afraid. In terms of congressional races, we mentioned several in the previous segment, but the one that stands out is the one vacated by Congressman Mark Meadows in the 11th District of Western North Carolina. The free-for-all in this majority Republican district means the primary will likely decide who goes to Washington. There are 12 candidates, of which 7 returned GRNC's candidate survey, with the other 5 getting 0-star evaluations. There are several decent candidates, but the standout seems to be Linda Bennett. The interesting thing is it seems to be drawing some out-of-state hit mail. I live in the district and just got a piece of hit mail against Bennett from a dark money PAC calling itself Fix Congress Now, which regurgitates previously debunked claims that Bennett is a never-Trumper. To the best of my knowledge, the accusations are false, and GRNC PVF recommends Linda Bennett in the 11th Congressional. In terms of General Assembly races, please note that whoever wins control of the General Assembly this year gets to draw districts for the next 10 years. If you live in Cabarrus or Rowan County, specifically House 83, vote Larry Pittman, who is the most stalwart Second Amendment supporter in the General Assembly. If you live in Davidson County, you have 2 interesting races. First, you have North Carolina House District 80, where former House Rep Sam Watford, who is anti-gun, is trying to get back into office. Keep him out. Vote Roger Younce for North Carolina House in District 80. Also in that district is Senate District 29, where incumbent Eddie Gallimore is fending off a bid by Steve Jarvis. Again, Jarvis is being supported by rhinos. Support Eddie Gallimore for Senate. The puppet master behind both, by the way, is Stan Bingham. If you live in Catawba County, I suggest you vote Mark Hollow for North Carolina Senate District 42 instead of Dean Proctor, who not only failed to return GRNC survey, but also has apparently given $1,000 to anti-gun Governor Roy Cooper. In sum, vote gun rights in both the primary and the election this year in order to avoid becoming Virginia. Go to grnc.org for candidate information, and also help us make this project possible by going to grnc.org/PVF for Political Victory Fund, grnc.org/PVF, and please make a donation. My name is Paul Vallone. You're listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, where each Sunday at 5 p.m. as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. Check out our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, at hyattguns.com. See you next Sunday at 5.